they will be cancelling all of their classes from the end of February. This is the first operational decision they have had to make, and which acknowledges their serious lack of funds. As the next month approaches and proceeds, it will be more and more difficult to reverse these inevitable actions. This is a most pressing matter, and I urge the Minister to ensure that funding is approved immediately.
You for selecting this, and I think I speak not just for myself but for all the members of the Justice Committee and our colleague Deputy O'Callaghan, who also was signed up to this. And we're deeply concerned. About 200 people from the deaf community attended an emergency meeting last Saturday in the Deaf Village to get an update on the imminent closure of vital services that are provided by the Irish Deaf Society, who are again facing financial crisis due to a lack of structured funding for their organisation. Now, the IDS is unique, it's deaf-led, and it provides and does its work through Irish Sign Language. It's an absolute irony that we as the committee, which were proud to deliver ISL as an official language of Ireland, now see the organisation which is at the helm of delivering the services and the access to public to support that new language is now facing imminent closure, and we are shocked and deeply concerned at that. Without the Irish Deaf Society, it's going to be virtually impossible for the deaf community to access these services. Many people at the meeting at the weekend questioned whether this was happening because they actually don't get access to the airwaves, and their voice in that sense is silenced. We should be in a position where they're looking at expanding their services, where ISL is taught to hearing people so that deaf people can become an integral part of our service. They provide advocacy services, deaf literacy, and at the Irish Sign Language Academy, which is needed now more than ever. We really need this issue addressed now in the short term, but to have a more long-term structured funding basis and support for them.
Listen, the issue of funding does not lie with one minister. Cross-department strategy is needed and was always going to be needed if we realistically want to implement the provisions of the legislation passed by the House on Irish Sign Language 13 months ago. We cannot realistically do that without the input of the organisation that has played a central role in providing support for deaf people for the last 38 years. The depth of their experience, history, legacy and trust, the social capital of the IDS, cannot be replicated by some other agency. The money they need to keep their services open is not a lot. They are looking for $150,000 to keep their doors open, or they'll face closure in March. But we need to engage in some joined-up thinking between the Departments of Health, Education, Public Expenditure and Justice to ensure that adequate funding is in place for the future. It makes no financial sense to see this organisation having to close its doors. If they are forced into closure, who will provide the advocacy service? Who will provide the awareness training? Who would provide Irish Sign Language classes? And who will liaise on behalf of the deaf community? It doesn't make any sense.
There's a song I don't like Mondays. I'm starting to not like Thursdays, to be honest with you, because I seem to be the only one nearly here on Thursday evening. But just again to welcome, I suppose, the topical issue and to thank Deputy Wallace, Deputy Daly and Deputy O'Callaghan, and to read, I suppose, the written response, but I will comment on some of the comments that were made there. On behalf of Minister McGrath, I want to thank Deputy Wallace, Daly and O'Callaghan for raising the important issue and for the opportunity to respond to the House today. The Government is committed to providing services and supporting people with disabilities which will empower them to live independent lives, providing greater independence in accessing the services they choose and enhance their ability to tailor and support requirements to meet their needs and plan their lives. Significant resources has been invested by the health sector in disability services over the past number of years. This year alone, the Health Service Executive have allocated $1.9 billion in disability services programmes. People with disabilities include those who are deaf, hard of hearing and deaf-blind, can access the broad range of acute care, primary care and community-based services are provided by the HSE. They can also avail of specialised disability services which are provided in a variety of community and residential settings, in partnership with service users, their families and carers, and a range of strategy, non-strategy and community groups. There are a number of non-strategy organisations specifically focused on addressing the needs of the deaf community services offered, including the family and support services. active technology and active listening devices, community rapid and lip reading classes, information and advice, sign language classes and mental health and deafness services. Most of these organisations receive funding from the HSE, either through local grants or various amounts or direct funding. The HSE has 35 separate services level agreements with organisations providing service for the deaf or hard of hearing in 2018. The largest provision of such services is the National Association of Deaf, which receives significant core funding from the HSE of £6.7 million in 2018. The Irish Deaf Society, on the other hand, focuses its services delivery on advocacy, training and development, as directed from delivery of services and social care support to deaf communities. For this reason, the Irish Deaf Society does not receive core funding from the HSE. Minister McGrath is aware of the financial difficulties that the Irish Deaf Society is currently experiencing and concerns regarding the future sustainability. There are a number of different funding options available to the organisations, and the Minister would strongly urge them to actively pursue them. I understand, for example, they have received funding from the past from the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government in receipt of the advocacy work. In receipt of 269,700 under the Department's most recent round of schemes to support national organisations in community and voluntary sector, which runs for 3 years prior from the mid-June 2016 to mid-June 2019. It has also been funded by the Department of Education and Skills and has received grants from the Department of Justice, Equality and National Lottery. I would like to stress that the Department of Health does not provide direct funding to organisations. Any such funding is provided by the HSE. Furthermore, the HSE can only fund organisations for the purpose of providing health service on its behalf. However, in May 2018, once-off bridging funding of £195,000 was provided by the Department of Health to the Irish Deaf Society to allow it to resolve its financial issues. This was provided on an exceptional once-off basis, and the Department made it clear that it would not be repeating it into the future and urged the organisation to take immediate steps to resolve its ongoing funding requirements. It would appear that the Irish Deaf Society has not made much progress in this regard, and it has submitted a further application to the HSE for core funding in 2019. The HSE has reviewed this submission and has again declined the Society's funding request on the basis that it does not provide health-related service. The decision has confirmed in writing to the Irish Deaf Society. I know Minister McGrath is presently in discussion with his Cabinet colleagues to try and resolve the Irish Deaf Society financial difficulties. These discussions have been very positive so far, and I know that Minister McGrath will be in the position in the coming days to confirm the outcome of these discussions.
Minister Byrne, I know that this isn't of your construct, but you know the HSE, you say, can only fund organisations for the purpose of providing health services on its behalf. I wonder who would argue that the provision of Irish language, Irish Sign Language skills, the opportunity to be able to communicate to people who otherwise would be mute and non-communicative in every way, having to cope with life in silence and in isolation. I find it incredible, and I think it is a very damning indictment of our governance that there is a situation here where the HSE on the one hand, the Department of Health, and heaven only knows what other number of departments are all very happily washing their hands of responsibility here in this regard. This is a significant body of people who are coping with a significant disability in their lives. They are absolutely deserving of our immediate response, and I'll say in conclusion, this is a most pressing matter, and it is an issue that government can solve quite quickly and without too much difficulty. The money has been committed, I understand, so I urge government and you to use your good offices to get your colleagues to do the right thing and to do it immediately.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, I actually agree that this is not a health matter. It's actually a justice matter, but we weren't the ones who nominated the Minister for Health to answer this issue. We demanded justice for the Irish Deaf Society to enable it to continue to provide the vital services that it provides for the deaf community on this, the same time as we bring in ISL as an official language of Ireland. It's an absolute necessity. Their expertise cannot be replicated. Their viability is imminently threatened. And the response in that sense, although I know it's not your fault, is not good enough, because we don't actually care where the money comes from. What we're saying very clearly is that this organisation needs you to tell them that there will be a stabilising strategy put in place, and that can come from a secure commitment, I suppose, from government to secure funding in the future and from now on. And if that comes from the justice budget or the education budget or wherever it is, we don't actually mind, but that's a responsibility of Cabinet and the departments. It's not one we can resolve, but I think they'd really love to hear, it's sort of hinted at in your reply, that the Minister might have some good news in the next coming days. I suppose our job is to say he better have, because this service cannot be sacrificed.
Thanks, Concordia. Listen, we certainly hope that the government sees sense and come up with a rational approach to this. The CSO 2016 states that there are 3,809 people living in Wexford who are deaf or have a serious hearing impairment. The Wexford Deaf community have had zero access to services following the closure of Chime and the Wexford Deaf Club. The current experience of the Irish deaf community is one of extreme marginalisation due to a lack of sign language recognition and provision. This manifests itself not just in their personal lives, but in their interactions with the organs of the state, including the education system and the health service, the court system, the national parliament itself. Such systematic exclusion is not acceptable and must be addressed urgently. Count Corla, I noticed that you liked my unusual shirt, and I can tell you that I was asked to wear it in solidarity with the people of Malawi by the Irish ambassador to Malawi, Jerry Cunningham, and I'm wearing it today in solidarity with the people of Malawi, but also in solidarity with a most special group, the Irish Deaf Society. Please, Minister, get the government to do the right thing.
Thanks, Cahirla. I suppose I won't make comment on the shirt, but I think it's lovely too, I have to be honest with you. I think the colour suits you, but you always wear bright colours anyway. Look, I don't have much more to add. I've listened, I've taken some notes on it as well, and again, just to say to the deputies who are here, I'm sorry that Minister McGrath isn't here himself, but basically on his report and feeding back to you, he is currently, as I said, working with his colleagues at government level and at cabinet level, and in the next number of days, he said, I'll read the last piece again, Minister Grau will be in a position in the coming days to confirm the outcome of these discussions. I've nothing more to add, because I can't stand here and promise you A, B and C. I'm not in that light. But again, just to thank you on his behalf, and I'm sorry he's not here to be able to give you a more wholesome reply. And as somebody who has used, with my own family, Sister Lydia's out in Dundrum, which I have great respect for, my own children in the past, and I understand how difficult it is for people who are adults and children as well, who find themselves in the position of not being able to communicate because of deafness or deaf-blind. And I just want to compliment people who do work in all societies connected with people with disabilities. I think they do an extraordinary job, and no more than those who work with people who are blind or people who are hard of hearing or deaf. So just to add that, now I will certainly bring back all your concerns, and I'll make it my personal business to speak to them over the next 2 days.
Thank you very much, Minister.